Tonight John's going to tell us about his Welsh childhood, memories of his Welsh childhood. So a big welcome please for Mr. John Summers.
So, thank you, Max. I'm delighted to be here because I believe that the Memory Cafe and the Trip Community Transport does wonderful work. And I think without it, a lot of people their lives would be poorer as a result. So I want to talk a little bit about my childhood, memories, the Memory Cafe, and at the end, I'm going to tell you about a trip. So, I'll start with a few memories. First of all, I grew up in southeast Wales, near Abergavenny, border country. And I lived in a very small village without electricity. In fact, we didn't have electricity until I was 12 years old. So, it was very, very simple and very labour intensive. I tell people that my mother didn't work. My father did. But of course it's a lie, because as you know, mothers then, and probably now as well, worked from the time that their eyes opened in the morning till they closed at night. And my father, I can hear him shouting now from the living room, because there were only 3 rooms, the living room, the kitchen, and there was a pantry. That was it. An outside toilet and a bedroom or 2 upstairs. It was very small, 4 boys and parents. And I can hear my father shouting, "Come on, Lily, come and sit down for a bit. Oh, I'll just finish this, I'll just finish this." And the big day of work, of course, was Mondays, which was wash day. And there was no automatic washing machine and spin dryer. It meant that father got up at about 5:30 and lit the fire under the boiler in the kitchen. And then my mother got up about 7 o'clock and put the clothes in the boiler. And she had a pole which she pushed them around with to actually mix them up in the water. And eventually they'd come out, and in the kitchen there'd be a big tin bath, and there she would scrub on a scrubbing board until she got everything clean, and then it went out on the line, it was out there all day in the orchard, and then she had to actually iron. Because there was no electricity, she had a primus stove and 2 flat irons. One was on the primus stove and the other one she was using. And she used the toe end of one iron to lift the other one off the primus and put it down, put the cold one on top, and then rubbed it on a rag to get the smuts off, and then iron the shirts. And she said, "We may be poor, but at least we can look tidy." And so every day when I went to school, I had a clean white shirt. And every one was ironed, with the collars ironed, the cuffs ironed. Remarkable. But it meant that she worked all the hours that God made. And the bath was also the bath we used for bath night. And the bath was put in front of the fire, and there was no other way of heating the water but putting kettles on the fire. And the bath was filled up, and then in age order, I was the youngest of 4 boys, and I got in first. Now one side of the bath was next to the fire, that was red hot. The other side of the bath was stone cold. So you put your elbow on one, you got a shock, you put your elbow on the other one, you got a shock. And I remember after we had a bath, my mother used to flop a towel over my head and then rub my hair like this and it'd be underneath it. I used to hate it. But then she'd get in the bath later on when the boys had a bath, then my father about 10 o'clock at night. By that time you could stand the broom up in the bath. But of course getting that fresh hot water was incredibly difficult. Out the back, actually out the front, there was an Elson toilet. Now this was a palaver in its own right, because my father had to go out at the dead of night, having dug a hole during the day, and tip the bucket and fill it all in so the bucket could be put back clean. Next door, later on, got a cesspit. And he still went out in the dark, but instead of digging a hole, he used to tip it in there. It was a heck of a lot easier. Now, we had no electricity till I was 12, as I said, and that meant that you took a candle to bed. We had Aladdin lamps, etc. downstairs. And I was always in my father's light because he was in the chair by the fire with his feet up on the mantelpiece, reading the paper. And if I walked between the light, which was on the dining table, and him, of course, the light went out. "Get out of the light, boy," he would shout. And it was a constant struggle to see what you were doing. Sewing was extremely difficult in that kind of light. Even doing homework. And I had to do my homework on the dining table with the lamp there. But going to bed was something else. Because we took a candle up to bed. And when the candle was blown out, no light. No torch, no nothing. And I'd be in bed, and of course, in the winter, it was as cold as a tomb. Because there was no heating. And on the inside of the windows, you could scratch the frost off with a thumbnail. And in the bed sheets, clinging on to a hot water bottle, you were frozen. You couldn't read because your hands would drop off if you had them outside the eider. So you kept everything underneath. And my brother, Arthur, who was a good bit older than me, used to get at the bottom of the stairs and go, "Ooh." And I could hear the stairs creaking as he came upstairs. Frightened me to death. And I was scared of the dark for many years. My job was to go up the top of the orchard and shut the chickens in. And I used to run up there like the wind and slam down that shutter and run back down across the orchard with the claws of monsters scrabbling up my back. I just escaped every night. But then we got electricity. And it was a wonderful occurrence, of course, because all of a sudden you could see. But what you could see was that the whole damn place needed decorating. Because the windows were small, and there was not a lot of daylight during the day, and everything was distempered. And then when you got electric, you could see in the corners. You could see all the scrapes on the wall, all the stains and all the smudges. So then everything had to be decorated. We had a radio before electricity, wet and dry batteries. It was my job to take the wet battery into Abergavenny, leave it at the radio shop, pick up the other one on the way back which had been charged and take it home. You had a dry battery in there as well. Sometimes in when digging my garden, my cottage was built in about the 15th century, I find those little cells, battery cells, joined together with a wire at the top, which came out of those big block batteries. Because there was no rubbish collection back in the 30s, so people just buried it or put it in ditches. And we had a radio, and when we did get electricity, we got, at last, a television, black and white TV. And because we only had one room, when Mother wanted to listen to the radio, and Dad wanted to watch the TV, there was always an argument. And they ended up, my mother, with her ear next to this great big Cosa radio, trying to listen to what was on the radio, and my father as close as he could get to the TV without blurring the picture too much, and listening to the sound. And that's how I grew up from the age of 12, when electricity came. Actually, our TV, we came back from Buckinghamshire after being away. We'd been in Devon in the cottage for 41 years. And we were coming back after a few years. I'd been away to work up in Buckinghamshire. And our TV, which was an old black and white TV I bought off one of the pupils at school, blew up. And we had let students, university students, use our cottage while we were away. And it was a mess. So we said, oh, we won't bother getting a TV now, we'll get one in the autumn, when the night's drawing. But then we found we quite liked it without a TV, and so we've not had a TV since 1978. And I think it's interesting because I saw a program not long ago where it was called Because the Pictures Are Better. And the premise of the program was, if you listen to the radio, you make the pictures in here. If you watch the TV, the pictures are made poaching. We lived in a part of Wales, and you may have lived in a part of England or Scotland or Wales or Ireland or somewhere else which is similar, in that the gentry was still in charge. You had minor landowners who owned a farm, gentlemen farmers who employed 10 or 12 people at harvest time, including me, and they never actually did a stroke themselves. Next step up, you've got the minor gentry, who had only 12 bedrooms, and a small park, and only owned 3 or 4 farms. And then at the top, you got the lords and ladies, and we had them where I lived in Wales, English lords and ladies, who owned hundreds of properties and thousands of acres, and they ruled the roost. Now, not only did most of the people in my village work for them, but they also lived in houses and cottages that belonged to them. So if they did something wrong, or they crossed their employer or the landowner, then not only did they have a risk of losing their job, but they might also lose their job, their house as well. And if you got 6 kids and you were on the road, that was a serious business. So there was lots of agreement with people that you didn't necessarily agree with. And I remember, and you may remember it too, is they talk about forelock tugging. Well, I remember actually seeing it. People pull their forelock to the gentry and call them sir. And I remember being out hunting one day, and there was a woman who saw a fox come out of the cover, and she did the whee! Whee! She was shouting in this field. And out came the master of foxhounds, who was the local lord. And of course, most of the gentry in Wales sent their children to English public schools. They didn't want them to talk with a Welsh accent, they didn't want them to learn the Welsh language, they wanted them to be like little lords in England. So when they came back, they spoke terribly, terribly posh. And this man on a horse in his scarlet jacket came riding past this woman. He took out his riding crop, cracked it, and then hit her across the shoulders and said, "Stop that damn kettle-walling, woman!" And I've never forgotten it, because it symbolised for me the social structure of where I grew up. You had to be careful, but we did do poaching. We used to poach pheasants, rabbits, and fish. And one day, we were down in front of this mansion. I think there were 24 bedrooms, and certainly most of the people in the area worked there in one way or another, on the estate or as a servant, etc. And my brother and I were fishing in the lake in front of this big house. And we'd done it lots of times before. We actually were using a fishing rod, which I'd made and which I've still got. And I looked for it tonight, I couldn't find it, unfortunately. But I will when I go back. And we were catching eels and roach. And we were doing rather well. We had a jar with some eels in, and a couple of roach. And then, the roach family, because of their name, we could hear them coming along the towpath, along the path by the side of the river, the lake. And we could hear them laughing and talking. My brother dived into the lake and got under the footbridge with just his chin and his head above the water and kept quite still under the bridge. I hid the fishing rod and pretended to be throwing sticks into the water because there was a footpath along the side of this lake, so we couldn't be turned off it. And then they came round the corner in finery, because they always looked fine because they never did any work. And they talked to me as the little boy from the cottages. And then they moved on, and my brother got out and we ran up the park and home and safe with our fish and our eels. And I can see those eels now in a frying pan. So, we also kept pigs, or a pig. I expect many of you did. We had a pigsty. And the pig was fattened throughout the year. On everything that wasn't eaten in the house went to the pig. And the pig was killed. Jones the pig butcher came. And as a boy I was fascinated by it. I had to build a fire beforehand. Because when you killed a pig, you put it on the fire and you burned all the bristles off it. And then I had to sit on the pig butcher would give us the bladder. Now they call the thing, or they used to, I don't know if they still do, that goes in a football, a bladder. It's rubber now. But I can only believe originally stitched leather footballs were made, and what went in before rubber was actually a pig's bladder. Now we used to blow it up and tie it with string, and we played football with it. I can hear the clunk now as you put your foot in it. And it was wonderful for a few days, until, if it was summer, it got dry and crisp, and then you put your foot in it, bang, end of bladder. Or, more likely, the dog would go after it, dig its teeth into it, end of bladder on the first time out. So, the pig was an important part, because at breakfast, my mother would go to the side of bacon, she'd take a knife, she'd cut some lashes off in the pan and cook it for our breakfast. And when you ate it, I can feel it now, you had those coarse bristles on the right. It wasn't like modern bacon. We used to get books, not many, because our bookshelf was about that wide and about that tall. And it had the Bible and a few other books like that, a few encyclopedias, and a couple of old Victorian novels. But sometimes, when at Sunday school, we got presents. And here's one, for instance, Gay Stories for Girls. Now, that word has changed a bit over the years. And I can assure you, it's not about gay girls in the modern context. It's about girls who actually go out on yachts, who do wonderful things, saving poor sailors from shipwrecks, all kinds of wonderful adventures. But then you also had thrilling stories for boys. And this was about racing cars, and being in Africa, and killing lions, and all kinds of things like that. And then, there were also in some houses, books like this, the Book of the Empire, the Wonder Book of the Empire. And of course, when I started school, when you looked at the map, I remember having a Knights Castile map atlas. And in there, nearly everything was pink. Because the Commonwealth, the territories, the empire stretched all around the world. Later on, of course, it came to the Eagle and other annuals like that. I love looking at these books now. So, books were quite limited. But we used to get the Beano and the Dandy and Film Fun, I remember. And later on, when I was a bit older, Lion. Who remembers Lion? Yes. And I also had a camera. I brought it along tonight. My oldest brother went in the Navy. My next brother went in the Air Force. Went in the Army. The next brother to me went in the Air Force. And my father said to me, they'll sort you out when you get in the services, boy. Because when I was a rebellious 16-year-old, he used to use the threat of national service as they'd square me up. It was a great disappointment to him that when I became a student and went away from home, I got deferment. I didn't have to do my national service straight away because I was a student. And whilst I was a student, they abolished national service. So I used to go home to Dad and say, nowhere then left for me to go, Dad. Donald was in the Navy, Arthur was in the Army, Tony was in the Air Force. They couldn't find a place for me, so they abolished it. And my brother Arthur was serving in post-war Germany. And he brought me this box camera. And I took endless photographs of this. Most of them were out of head, or out of focus, or showing things that I didn't want in the photograph. You know how it is. You didn't have the editing facilities then. You had that thrill of taking that roll of film to the chemist, and then turning up to get that packet, and opening it up to see if there was anything decent in it. Very often there wasn't. Finally, I said I would tell you about a trip. We never went anywhere, because it wasn't the culture to have holidays. You stayed carts around the countryside, and this Chappell's coaches from Raglan would come around and pick us up, and off we go to Port Call of Barry Island. We'd have a wonderful day. The women would work all afternoon, looking after the kids, serving sandwiches, getting the drinks. The fathers sat in the deck chairs with a knotted handkerchief on their head and didn't lift a finger. If we were lucky, we got 2 shillings to go up the fair and actually get on the fun fair, which was absolutely wonderful. On the trip home, everybody was tired. I think I was about 13. And I was in love with Susan Scott. Now I've got to be careful with my wife's name. Susan. And Susan Scott was sitting by me on this bus. And her head began to rest on my shoulder. And one thing led to another, as they say, and she sat on my lap. And in Wales we say, we were having a cwtch. We were having a cuddle. Very innocent, but she was on my shoulder. My father, seeing this, looked at us, smiled, looked at my mother, and he started to sing this song. Please join in if you know it. They try to tell us we're too young to really be in love. They say that love's a word we've only heard, but can't begin to know the meaning of. And yet we're not too young to know this love will last though years may go. And then someday you may recall we were not too young at all. It was a mention that I direct community theatre, and in November this year, the end of next month, we're doing a production called The Music of Time in Pehembry. It'll be in the hall, and it's about life in the 1940s, the childhood of people like me, but also the old age of the young people taking part, so 2080. So we're taking scenes like medical care, transport, family life, and there'll be a scene on 1940 and a scene in 2080. There's a choir, a soloist, original music, everything we do is original. So please come along. And next year, I'm doing a production to commemorate the First World War. And that will be a moving production, hopefully in both ways, around the village, ending up at the War Memorial. So thank you for your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.